It was at my own retirement cookout, 28 years on the line, paper plate going soft in my hand, that an old-timer raised a beer and toasted the wrong couple. He meant well. He was 3 drinks in and his eyes were not what they used to be. And he lifted that can and he said, "To the happy couple," and he was not looking at me. He was looking at my wife, and he was looking at the man standing a little too close beside her. And for one long second, 100 faces in my own backyard froze, and not one of them was looking at me either. That is how I found out. Not from a phone, not from a letter, not from a stranger at my door. I found out the way the whole county already knew, all at once, in my own yard, holding a hamburger, while a banner that said, "Happy Retirement," flapped over my head in the warm air. I did not drop the plate. I did not raise my voice. I have spent 28 years around current you cannot see, and the first thing the line teaches you, the thing that keeps you alive, is that a wire that looks dead can still kill you. And the only safe move is to keep your hands steady and your head clear until you know for certain what is hot. So I raised my own can, easy, and I said, "To good neighbors," and I took a drink. And I watched the air go back into 100 lungs, and the party limped on. And inside my chest, I had already started doing the math on a line I had stupidly assumed was dead for years. Stay with me, because what I did over the next 2 months, after the most humiliating 10 seconds of my life, is the whole reason I am telling you this. I did not make a scene in front of my kids and my coworkers and half my church. I went quiet. I got smart. And in the end, the 2 people who tried to make a fool of me in my own backyard learned that the quiet man holding the hamburger was the most dangerous person at that party. I am 50 years old. I worked the line my whole adult life for the electric co-op out in the eastern part of North Carolina. The kind of country where the land is flat and the storms come off the water and a man's word still means something at the feed store. I have been married for 24 years. 2 kids, a boy who is 16 and a girl who is 13. And they were both at that cookout. And protecting them from what they almost saw on their daddy's face is the reason I kept it together when everything in me wanted to come apart. If you are out there tonight, and you have ever stood in a room and felt like you were the last one to know, tell me where you are watching from. I would like to know who is on this line with me. Let me tell you about the trust first, because if you do not understand what I gave her, the rest is just a sad story instead of the one I am actually telling. I married Sheila when I was 26. She worked at the bank in town, still does, behind the counter where everybody in 3 counties comes to cash a check. The kind of woman who knew the whole town's business and kept most of it kind. I fell for her because she was easy to be around in a way I am not. The line makes a man hard in places. You spend your life in a bucket 40 feet up in the wind, or out in the worst night of the year while everybody else is warm, restoring power to people who will never know your name. Sheila was soft where I was weathered. We fit. And I worked. The thing nobody tells you about line work is that the worse the weather is for everybody else, the better it is for your overtime. And the more you are gone exactly when your family needs you home. Every hurricane that came up the coast, I was gone for a week or 2, sleeping in trucks, eating cold sandwiches, climbing poles in water up to the boards, while the radio played the names of towns that had gone dark. I told myself that was love. Every storm I worked was a Christmas paid for, a roof kept on, a girl's braces, a boy's first truck someday. When a man is built to provide, he will tell himself that being gone is the same as being there, as long as the money is good. It is not. I know that now. The lights I kept on for the whole county were off in my own house, and I was too far up the pole to see it. I want you to know what that work actually was, because the word overtime is too soft for it. It was being woken at 2 in the morning by a phone that meant a substation was down and 10,000 people were in the dark. and getting up without a word and going. It was the ice storm of a few years back where I was on the boards for 19 hours straight. My hands so cold I could not feel the gloves. Bringing power back to an old folks' home one frozen span at a time. It was missing my son's middle school graduation because a transformer blew 3 counties over and the crew was short and somebody's grandmother was on an oxygen machine. I never said no. In 28 years, I never once said no. Because that is the job. And because being needed was the closest thing I had to feeling like a good man. And every storm I chased, every dark town I lit back up, was a night my own wife had the house to herself and a friend who knew my schedule better than I wished he had. I built the opening with my own 2 hands and called it providing. I want to tell you about the man, because in this story, the man matters as much as the wife. His name was Dennis, and Dennis was not a stranger. Dennis was my friend. 15 years, he owned the hardware and feed store in town. He was at every cookout and every ball game. He was the godfather to my daughter. He had helped me roof my own house one hot July. I trusted that man in my home the way you trust a brother. And while I was up the coast in the dark, keeping the lights on for strangers, my friend was in my kitchen, in my life, in my marriage. And half the town watched it happen and decided it was not their place to tell me. That is the part that took the longest to forgive. Not him, the silence. A whole community that looked at a good man working storms to feed his family and decided his dignity was not worth the awkward conversation. The thing about a betrayal from a friend is that it robs you twice. You lose the wife, but you also lose every good memory you had with the man. Because now you have to go back through 15 years and wonder which laughs were real and which were him sitting in your life waiting for you to leave for work. I lost the July we roofed the house. I lost 100 ball games and cookouts. I lost the version of my own past where I had a best friend, because it turned out I never did. I just had a man patient enough to wear the costume for 15 years. A wife can break your heart. A friend who does it with her breaks something underneath the heart. The floor you stand your whole life on. That is the wound I carried up every pole for 2 months while I quietly made it right. Here is the part I have to own, because I will not tell this if I cannot be honest. There had been a coldness for years that I had explained away. Sheila pulling back, less laughing. A distance at the dinner table I told myself was just 2 tired people in the long middle of a marriage. And there had been 100 small things I sanded smooth. Dennis's truck at my house when I got home early from a storm, which made sense. He was my friend. He was probably dropping something off. Sheila going quiet when his name came up. The way the 2 of them had an ease with each other that I told myself was just old friendship. I had every gauge I needed, and I refused to read a single one, because reading them meant my whole life was a lie. And a man will believe almost anything before he will believe that. Let me tell you how the cracks had been showing, the ones I see now, plain as a downed line across a road. The phone, of course, face down for the last 2 years. A passcode where there had never been one. Carried into rooms it never used to go. The nights I called from a storm staging area and it rang and rang. A girl's weekend at the beach that her own sister, when I mentioned it months later, said never happened. Money. Small and strange, the way it always is. A hotel an hour up the coast on a weekend I was working. A charge at a steakhouse the same night she said she ate at home. And the thing that I cannot forgive myself for. My 13-year-old, about a year before the cookout, asking me in the truck if Mr. Dennis was going to be at the lake with us, and the careful way she watched my face when she asked it. Kids see everything. They understand almost none of it, and they carry the part they do not understand. And no child should ever have to hold a thing like that for a grown-up. And there were the looks, which I only understand now. A small town talks with its eyes long before it talks with its mouth. At church, At the ball field, at the diner, there had been a softness in how people looked at me that I had mistaken for respect. The way you look at a man who works hard. It was not respect, it was pity. They knew, or half knew, and they had all made the same quiet decision, which was that it was not their business and not their place. The deacon knew, the men I drank coffee with knew, the woman at the post office knew. For the better part of 2 years, I walked through my own town wearing a thing everyone could see but me, and they let me wear it. Because telling a good man his life is on fire is an uncomfortable thing, and people will choose their own comfort over your dignity nearly every time. I do not hate them for it, but I learned something permanent about the difference between a town that likes you and a town that has your back. And they are not the same town. Now back to the cookout, and what I did when the party was over. That night, after the last truck pulled out of my driveway, after I hugged my kids and told them it was a good party and watched them go up to bed not knowing, I went and sat in my own work truck in the dark, the bucket truck I had driven for years. And I did the only thing my whole life had trained me to do. I did not touch the line. I tested it. I am a lineman. When you find a wire you assumed was dead and it turns out to be hot, you do not grab it in a panic. You de-energize the situation. You get your equipment in order, and you do not put your hands on anything until you know exactly what you are dealing with and exactly how to make it safe. Panic up a pole is how men die. So I sat in that truck and I let the rage burn down to something cold and useful. And I started, very quietly, to plan. I will be honest with you about that hour in the truck, because I think some of you need to hear that the steadiness did not come easy. There was a stretch, sitting there in the dark with the smell of motor oil and cut grass, where I wanted to walk back inside and end my marriage with my voice and maybe my hands, the way half the men I know would have, the way a part of me felt entitled to. I gripped the wheel until it creaked. I thought about Dennis roofing my house in that hot July, laughing, drinking my beer. And I thought about every storm I had worked while he sat where I was supposed to sit. And the wanting to hurt him was a live thing in my chest. And then I thought about my 2 kids asleep upstairs. And I thought about a 16-year-old having to visit his father somewhere with bars on the windows. And that picture was a bucket of cold water. A man who throws the punch loses the house, the kids, the high ground, all of it, in 1 second of feeling good. I was not going to hand them that. I put both hands back on the wheel, and I breathed, and I let it cool. And by the time the porch-light timer clicked off, I was a calmer and far more dangerous man than I had been at the toast. The next morning I called a lawyer, and what that lawyer told me is the most useful thing I can hand you tonight. So write it down. Do not confront. Not yet. Get quiet and get organized. And in this state, of all states, get your facts in a row before anybody knows you have them. The lawyer was a woman in the county seat who had been doing this work for almost 30 years, and she had a calm in her voice that put the ground back under my feet. I told her everything: the cookout, the toast, the friend, the silence, the years I had explained away. And then she told me something about North Carolina that I did not know. And I'm going to share the shape of it. Though I want to be clear, I am no lawyer, and your state runs its own way, and you need your own attorney for your own life. This is just my story. She told me that North Carolina is one of a small handful of states that still lets a wronged husband do something most states took off the books a long time ago. She told me that here, the law still recognizes that a marriage is a real thing that another person can be held responsible for helping to destroy. She told me that a man in my position can, in the right circumstances, bring a civil claim against the third party, the one who came into a good marriage and helped wreck it, and that those claims are real and that the records of them are public. She was careful with me. She said it is not a thing to swing around like a hammer, that it is serious, that it has rules and limits and timing, that whether it fit my facts was a question for careful lawyering and not for anger. But she said the law existed, and that the mere fact that it existed changed the whole shape of what was about to happen. Because the man in my kitchen owned a business in that town, and his name was on a sign over Main Street, and a public record is a public record. I want to be careful here, because I am not telling you to go file lawsuits, and I am not telling you the law for your life. What I am telling you is that I learned, sitting in that office, that I was not nearly as powerless as I had felt holding that hamburger. The quiet man had options the loud man never would have found, because the loud man would have thrown a punch in his own backyard and handed them the whole story. Then she gave me the rules, and they are the rules I want you to carry no matter what state you are in. Do not move out of the house, because the day you pack a bag, you have written the story of who walked away from this family. Do not empty or freeze the joint account, because that makes you the villain in a judge's eyes. Do not confront, because the second they know you know, the evidence dries up and the stories get straight and the lawyers come out. Document everything. Get the proof in your hand while they still think the dumb, faithful lineman is 40 feet up a pole and none the wiser. So that is what I did. And after a public humiliation that the whole county had witnessed, the hardest part was that I now had to go home and act like a man trying to work on his marriage. Because here is the strange thing about a public reveal. Once it is out, the cover story flips. I could not pretend I did not know, because everybody knew I knew. They had seen my face at the toast. So my play was different. My play was the forgiving husband, the good man trying to hold his family together. I told Sheila, calm, that I had seen what I had seen, that I was hurt, but that 24 years and 2 kids were worth trying to save, and that I wanted us to go to counseling and work on it. And she cried, and she said yes, and she was so relieved. Because a husband trying to reconcile is a husband who is not calling a lawyer. She had no idea I had already called mine. I have climbed poles in ice storms with the wind trying to take me off the boards. Nothing was harder than sitting across from that woman in a counselor's office, holding her hand, talking about our future, while a folder thickened in a lawyer's drawer an hour away. I built the case the way you build a safe job site, slow and by the book and nothing left to chance. Every odd charge, lined up by date, 2 years of them, the hotels, the steakhouse, a weekend at a cabin I was never at. My lawyer, working within the law, gathered what could be properly gathered, cleanly, the kind of record that holds up in daylight and that I would not be ashamed to have my own son read someday. And because the reveal had been so public, I had something most betrayed men do not, which was a backyard full of witnesses who had all seen the same thing. I did not have to prove the affair to the town had proved it to me. The counseling itself became the strangest part of the whole thing, because it was real to her and a job site to me. We sat on a soft couch in an office in town once a week, and she did the work of a woman trying to save a marriage, and I did the work of a man pretending to. And the counselor, a decent woman who had no idea, kept telling us how much progress we were making. Every week, Sheila left those sessions a little more relaxed, a little more sure I was coming back around. And every week I drove the long way home so I could stop at a gas station and send my lawyer the notes from my head before they faded. I'm not proud of how good I got at it, but I will tell you that a man who has been lied to for 2 years inside his own marriage does not owe his betrayer a heads up that the lie is finally running both directions. I had one bad moment that nearly undid the whole thing. I kept everything on a cheap second phone the lawyer told me to carry, and one Saturday I had it out in the garage, going through the charges, when Sheila came out to bring me a glass of tea, sweet as anything, part of her new, warm act. I had maybe 3 seconds. That phone went into the gut of an open electrical panel I was supposedly working on. behind the breakers where no one but a fool reaches. And my real phone came up showing a weather radar before she was through the door. I thanked her for the tea. She kissed the top of my head, and after she went inside, I stood there with my heart going like a generator under load, understanding how close 2 years of patience had come to dying over a glass of sweet tea. After that, I never kept that phone on the property at all. Keep your proof somewhere your own home cannot reach. That is not paranoia. That is just locking out the panel before you put your hands in it. There was a near miss, and like always, it came dressed as kindness. About 3 weeks into the counselling, Sheila turned all the way warm. She started leaving little nunch in my lunch the way she had when we were young. She made the Brunswick stew my mother used to make. She told me, with what looked like real tears, that she had thrown away the best man she had ever known for nothing. That Dennis had never been half of what I was. That she would spend the rest of her life making it up to me if I would let her. And I am a man who loved this woman for 24 years. And I sat there with her notes in my lunchbox, and I felt the whole cold plan start to thaw. Because maybe it was real. Maybe the storm had passed. Maybe I could put the lawyer away, and we could grow old after all. I let myself believe it for the better part of a week. And then I learned, in the quiet, careful way I was still keeping my eyes open, that the very week she was leaving me love notes and crying about Dennis being nothing, she was still seeing him. The warmth was not a homecoming. It was a hand laid gently over my eyes by someone who had felt the temperature change in me and gotten scared. She did not want me back. She wanted me comfortable and quiet, and not at a lawyer's office while she figured out her next move. The day I understood that was the day I stopped grieving the marriage, because there was nothing left on the line to save. There was a hot wire dressed up to look dead, and I had almost grabbed it with both hands. I want to stop there a second, because that fake warm stretch is what takes good men down, and it nearly took me. A person who is close to losing their grip on you will very often turn into the sweetest version of themselves you have seen in years, right when your gut has started asking the hard questions. Because sweetness is the cheapest way to make you stop looking. If the coldest person in your life goes warm overnight for no reason you can name, do not throw away your test equipment because the line suddenly feels safe. Test before you touch. Every time. I tested. I am grateful every day that I did. Here is how it ended, and I will tell it plain. My lawyer had everything ready. The divorce filing and the careful, lawful groundwork around the rest. We chose the timing with care, and the first thing I did had nothing to do with either of them. It was the kids. I did not want my son and my daughter anywhere near the day it all came down, so I arranged for them to spend a long weekend with my brother at the coast. Fishing, a boat, their cousins, and my 16-year-old looked at me when I dropped them off, and he did not ask, but he said, "You okay, Dad?" in a voice that was older than 16. And I told him I was going to be just fine, and I hugged both of them, and I held my daughter, the one who had asked about Dennis at the lake a year ago, a little longer, because she had been carrying something she should never have had to carry, and I was about to set it down for her for good. Then the papers were served, properly, by the book. And here is where the quiet man's options came due. My lawyer made it known, through the proper channels, that given the facts and given this state's particular laws, there were claims that could be brought against a certain local business owner, and that such matters become public record. I never had to raise my voice. I never had to throw a punch in a backyard. A man whose name hangs over Main Street, a man who has to face that town every single day at his own cash register, does the math very fast when he understands that the whole county could read the particulars in the courthouse. And a wife who counted on a quiet, cheap exit understands very fast that quiet just left the table. I was home when Sheila understood it had all turned. She came in from work and the papers were waiting. And she read them. And then she read the part her lawyer would later explain to her about what this state allows. and I watched the warm act fall off her face like a mask that had stopped fitting. She started to talk fast, the way they do. The notes in my lunchbox and the Brunswick stew and the counseling, all of it suddenly evident she wanted to wave. And I held up one hand, gentle, the way you signal a man on the ground to kill the power before you say another word. I told her there was nothing left to talk about between us, that the lawyers would handle the rest, and that she had spent 3 weeks being sweet to a man who had already, quietly, made himself safe. She asked me how long I had known. I told her the truth, that I had known since a drunk old man toasted the wrong couple in my own backyard, and that I had spent every day since being exactly the calm, dumb, faithful husband she counted on, while a folder thickened an hour away. The quietest thing I ever did was the loudest, and standing in our kitchen, she finally heard it. What came after was not loud, the law rarely is, because the affair was documented, and because the whole county had witnessed the truth in my own backyard. There was nothing to argue about. Because this state's laws gave me leverage that most men never have, the division of everything came out fair in a way that protected my kids' future. Because I had never moved out, never touched a joint account, never once lost my temper where a single soul could point to it. I was the steady one on every page a judge would ever read. And because I had carried myself like a man through the most humiliating season of my life, my kids' main home is with me, in the house I kept, with the porch light their daddy still comes home to. I have to tell you about my kids, because they are the reason any of it was worth doing the right way. My son, 16 and old for his age, came to me a few weeks after it was all in the open, and he told me he had known something was wrong for a long time, that he had seen Dennis's truck and heard the quiet, and that he had not known how to tell me without blowing the family apart. He had been carrying it, the way the oldest always do, half believing it was his job to hold the house together. I sat him down and I told him the truest thing I know. I told him it was never his to carry, that no kid is the keeper of a grown-up secret, and that a father's job is to take that weight off a child, not lay it on him. My daughter, the one who had asked about Dennis at the lake, just needed to know the ground was not going to keep moving. She needed pancakes on Sunday, and her daddy in the same house, and the certainty that the worst was over. So I gave her exactly that, week after week. Because steady is a thing you prove by showing up the same way 1,000 times, not by saying it once. The greatest thing that came out of the whole mess is that both of my kids learned, watching their father, that you can be hurt as bad as a person can be hurt and still not become cruel, still keep your head, still do it right. That is a lesson I would not trade for an easy life. The man, Dennis, did not come out of it the way he came in. A fellow who is happy to sit in another man's kitchen while that man works storms is, it turns out, not so happy to have his own name read aloud in a building with the county seal on the door. The threat alone changed everything about how the rest went, and the town, the same town that had stayed so politely silent, found out anyway, because towns always do. He sold the store within the year and moved on. My wife learned, the slow and bitter way, that the man she humiliated me for would not stand next to her for one hard minute, once standing next to her cost him something. That is its own justice. I never had to lift a hand to build it. The truth just lets people be exactly who they already were, if you are patient enough to step back and let them. She called me once, about 6 months after it was final. She had heard the kids were doing well, that the house was quiet and good, that I had taken a foreman job that kept me home more. She said maybe we gave up too soon. She said the kids needed both of us under one roof. She said she had made a mistake, and her voice broke, and I believe it did. I let her finish, because I have learned you treat every line as live until you have proven it is not, and you let it settle before you decide it is safe. And then I told her, with no heat in it at all, that I wished her well, that the kids loved her and always would, and that our marriage ended not at that cookout but years before it, on a day she chose and I did not. I said goodnight. I hung up, and I walked through my quiet house and turned off the lights one room at a time, the way I have turned the power on and off my whole life. And I checked on 2 sleeping kids. And then I slept like a man who had finally found the hot wire, made it safe, and gone home. I think about that toast sometimes. The most humiliating 10 seconds of my life. In my own backyard, under a banner with my name on it. And I think it might have been the luckiest 10 seconds too, because it is the moment the line I had assumed was dead finally showed me it was live, before it could do worse than humiliate me. A slower truth might have cost me the house, the kids, the years. The loud, public, awful version is the one that saved me, because it left me no room to keep lying to myself. Here is what I have left for you, and then I will let you rest. A wire that looks dead can still kill you. The line you assume is safe, the one you have walked past 1,000 times, is exactly the one that puts you on your back if you grab it without testing. People are the same. The marriage you assume is sound, the friend you assume is true, deserve the same respect you give a line you cannot see the voltage on. Test before you touch. And if you ever find out, in the worst possible way, that something you trusted was hot the whole time, do not grab it in a rage and burn yourself worse. Step back. De-energize. Get a professional. Make it safe the right way. With patience and a clear head, and protect the kids who are standing too close to the line. You will get the power back on, and you will still be a man your children can be proud of when the lights come up. If the people who knew your whole heart ever decide to use it against you, in front of God and everybody, you cannot stop the humiliation of the moment, but you can decide what you do in the 10 seconds after. Keep your hands steady, keep your head clear. Let the truth and the law carry the load that anger never could. It keeps you alive, it keeps you out of trouble, and it lets you walk back into your own house with your name still worth something. Take care of yourselves out there. Test before you touch. And tell me where you are watching from tonight. I read every one.